The Dragon's Chain. First document. Maya Chen had always been different from the other maintenance workers on Station Zerion 7. While her colleagues complained about the endless corridors, the strange alien architecture, and the eerie silence that filled the lower levels, Maya found herself drawn to the mysteries hidden within the ancient structure. The station was a marvel of engineering, built by a long-dead civilization whose technology still baffled human scientists 2 centuries after first contact. The Galactic Council had assigned humans to maintain the station as part of their probationary membership. It was grunt work, the kind of job given to species deemed too primitive for real responsibility. The other races, the crystalline Vorthak, the gas-based ethereals, the insectoid Zephyrians, all looked down on humanity as barely evolved primates lucky enough to stumble into space travel. Maya didn't mind the condescension. She had always preferred solitude anyway, and the lower levels of Zerion 7 provided plenty of it. Her official duties involved checking atmospheric processors and cleaning biofilters, but she spent most of her time exploring the sealed sections that even the station's AI warned against entering. That's how she discovered the chamber. It was on sub-level 47, behind a door marked with symbols that her translator couldn't decipher. The door had been sealed with what looked like molten metal, but centuries of neglect had weakened the barrier enough for Maya's plasma cutter to breach it. She expected another empty room filled with broken machinery or alien graffiti. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. The chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows beyond her headlamp's reach. Ancient symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with their own inner light. But it wasn't the architecture that stopped Maya in her tracks. It was the creature chained in the center of the room. It was massive, easily 20 meters long from snout to tail. Its scales shimmered between deep purple and midnight black, and even in apparent sleep, it radiated an aura of barely contained power. 4 limbs ending in razor-sharp claws were spread-eagled and bound to the floor by chains that hummed with energy. Its wings, torn and scarred, were pinned beneath similar restraints. A dragon, an honest-to-God alien dragon, chained like some ancient prisoner. Maya's first instinct was to run. Her second was to report the discovery to her supervisors. But something in the creature's posture, in the way its massive form seemed diminished by captivity, made her hesitate. She had always felt like a prisoner herself, trapped on a dead-end assignment, looked down upon by species that considered humans little better than clever animals. She activated her scanner and began recording. The chains appeared to be made of some kind of energy-conducting metal that fed directly into the station's power grid. Whatever this creature was, someone had gone to enormous lengths to keep it imprisoned. Over the following days, Maya found herself returning to the chamber during her off-shifts. She told herself she was conducting research, gathering data that might prove valuable to the scientific community. But the truth was simpler. She was fascinated by the dragon and disturbed by its imprisonment. The creature never moved during her visits. It lay as still as death, its massive chest rising and falling in a rhythm so slow that Maya sometimes wondered if it was actually breathing at all. Its eyes remained closed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was aware of her presence. On her 5th visit, Maya brought her scanner closer to the chains. The energy readings were off the charts. Whatever was powering those restraints was drawing enough electricity to run a small city. But more disturbing was what her deep scan revealed about the creature itself. It was alive, but barely. The chains weren't just holding it down, they were slowly draining its life force. Maya had seen enough torture in the history vids to recognize it when she saw it. This wasn't imprisonment, it was a slow, deliberate execution stretched out over centuries. She began researching the station's history, diving deep into archives that most humans were never supposed to access. What she found chilled her to the bone. Zerion 7 had once been a prison, built by the extinct Corvani civilization to hold their most dangerous criminals and political prisoners. The dragon had been here for over 200 years, sentenced to die slowly as an example to others who might dare oppose the Corvani Empire. The fact that the creature was still alive after 2 centuries of this torture spoke to either incredible resilience or unimaginable suffering. Probably both. Maya tried to put the dragon out of her mind. It was none of her business, and getting involved would only cause trouble. But every night she found herself thinking about those closed eyes and that slowly rising chest. She had always hated bullies, and this felt like the ultimate expression of cruelty, keeping something alive just to make it suffer. 2 weeks after her discovery, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She was scheduled for night shift maintenance on the lower levels, which meant she would be alone for 8 hours with minimal supervision. Instead of heading to her assigned sector, she made her way to sub-level 47. The dragon was exactly as she had left it, motionless and chained. But this time, Maya had brought more than just her scanner. Hidden in her maintenance kit was a thermal lunchbox containing something she had never expected to share with an alien dragon: soup. It was nothing special, just standard-issue vegetable broth from the station cafeteria. But as Maya approached the massive creature, she realized she had no idea how to communicate with it, or even if it was capable of communication at all. For all she knew, it was nothing more than a dangerous animal that had been caged for good reason. She set the container down a few meters from the dragon's head and backed away. Minutes passed in silence. Then, without any movement from the creature, a voice spoke directly into her mind. "Why?" Maya stumbled backward, her heart hammering. The voice was feminine, ancient, and filled with a weariness so profound it made her chest ache. She looked around the chamber wildly before realizing the voice had come from the dragon itself. I brought soup," Maya managed to stammer. "Why?" the voice repeated, and this time Maya could feel the genuine confusion behind it. "No one has shown kindness to Zarathel in 200 rotations of this world. Why would a small human risk herself for one already dead?" Maya found her courage returning. "Because you're not dead, and because keeping someone chained like this is wrong, no matter what you might have done." The dragon's eyes opened for the first time since Maya had discovered her. They were the color of molten gold, ancient and intelligent, and filled with a pain so deep it made Maya's soul ache. Zarathel studied the small human standing before her, and Maya felt like she was being examined by something far older and wiser than anything she had ever encountered. "You do not know what I am," Zarathel said. "You do not know my crimes." "I know you've been tortured for 200 years, Maya replied. "I know that's wrong regardless of what you did, and I know that no one deserves to die slowly and alone." Something shifted in those golden eyes. For the first time in 2 centuries, Zarathel felt something other than pain and despair. She felt hope. Maya opened the soup container and pushed it closer to the dragon's head. "I don't know if you can even eat this, but it's warm, and it's the best I could do." Zarathel lowered her massive head toward the small offering. She couldn't reach it with her mouth. The chains prevented too much movement, but she didn't need to. With a barely perceptible gesture, she lifted the container telekinetically and brought it to her lips. The soup was simple, nothing like the exotic foods she had once enjoyed in her freedom. But it was the first thing in 2 centuries that had been given freely, without malice or calculation. The warmth spread through her body, but it was the kindness behind the gesture that truly nourished her. "Thank you," she whispered, and Maya heard tears in that mental voice. As Zarathel consumed the simple meal, something began to change in the chamber. The chains that had bound her for 200 years began to vibrate. The energy field that had kept her weak and helpless started to fluctuate. Neither Maya nor Zarathel noticed at first. They were too focused on this impossible moment of connection between two beings from different worlds. But the chains noticed. They had been designed to respond to the prisoner's emotional state, to tighten when she felt anger or defiance, to drain her more completely when she felt despair. They had never been programmed to handle something as simple and pure as gratitude. The metal began to smoke. Energy arced wildly from link to link. Somewhere deep in the station's core, warning lights began to flash as power systems that had run smoothly for centuries suddenly spiked beyond safe parameters. Maya saw it first, the way the chains seemed to glow brighter, the way the air around them began to shimmer with heat. "Something's happening," she said, backing away from the dragon. Zarathel felt it too. For the first time in 200 years, the constant drain on her life force was wavering. She could feel strength returning to her limbs, power flowing back into her consciousness. It should have been impossible. The chains had been designed by the most advanced civilization in the galaxy to be absolutely unbreakable. But the Corvani had made one fatal error in their design. They had assumed that their prisoner would always hate, always fight, always feel the negative emotions that would keep her weak. They had never considered that someone might show her kindness, might remind her of what she had once been beyond her crimes and failures. The chains began to melt. It started slowly, just a few links growing soft around the edges. But as Zarathel felt more of her strength return, as the warmth of unexpected friendship filled the cold places in her heart, the process accelerated. 2 centuries of built-up energy, of suppressed power and denied freedom, began to pour back into her massive form. Maya watched in amazement and growing terror as the creature that had lain motionless for so long began to move. The chains that had seemed unbreakable were flowing like water now, pooling on the chamber floor in molten puddles that hissed and steamed. "Zarathel," she whispered, not sure if she should run or stay. The dragon turned those golden eyes toward her, and Maya saw something that made her breath catch. There was power there now, ancient and terrible and barely contained. But there was also something else, gratitude and a fierce protectiveness, that made Maya realize she had just made either the best or worst decision of her life. "Little human," Zarathel said, her mental voice now carrying undertones of barely restrained force. "You have done something that should not have been possible. You have reminded me that not all beings are cruel, that kindness exists even in the darkest places." The last of the chains melted away, and Zarathel rose to her full height for the first time in 200 years. She was magnificent and terrifying, a creature of myth and legend given flesh. Her wings spread wide, no longer torn but somehow healed by her return to power. Her scales gleamed like polished gems, and when she breathed, small flames danced between her teeth. "But now," she continued, "we both face a choice. The station's masters will not allow this freedom to stand. They will come for both of us." Maya's communicator crackled to life. "Maintenance worker Chen, report to supervisor immediately. Energy anomaly detected in your sector." Maya looked up at the dragon. Her dragon, she realized, and made the second life-changing decision of the night. She switched off her communicator. "Then I guess we'd better be ready for them," she said. Zarathel's lips curved in what might have been a smile. It was not a pleasant expression on a creature designed for war, but Maya felt no fear. Something had changed between them in those moments when chains melted and freedom was reborn. They were no longer stranger and prisoner. They were allies. The chamber filled with the sound of approaching footsteps as station security began to converge on their location. But for the first time in 200 years, Zarathel was not afraid. She had been shown kindness by the most unlikely person imaginable, and that kindness had set her free. Now it was time to return the favor. The Dragon's Chain, second document. The station's emergency klaxons began wailing as Zarathel stretched her wings for the first time in 2 centuries. The sound echoed through the massive chamber, bouncing off walls that had witnessed only silence and suffering for far too long. Maya felt the vibrations in her bones as automated systems throughout Zerion 7 registered the impossible. A prisoner thought permanently contained was free. "How long do we have?" Maya asked, checking her equipment harness and trying to suppress the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Zarathel's golden eyes swept the chamber, taking in details she had been too weak to notice during her imprisonment. "Not long. The station's security protocols were designed to respond to my escape. They will flood this level with stun gas within minutes, then send in the war forms." Maya's blood chilled. She had heard whispers about the war forms, automated combat units left behind by the extinct Corvani. They were supposedly deactivated, relegated to museum pieces after the Galactic Council declared them too dangerous for active use. But the thought that they might still function in this forgotten corner of the station made her stomach clench. "Can you fight them?" she asked. Zarathel flexed her claws, and Maya heard the scrape of keratin harder than diamond against the metal floor. "I was weakened, not helpless. But 200 years of imprisonment have taken their toll. I am not what I once was." The sound of marching feet echoed from the corridor beyond the melted door. Heavy, mechanical steps that didn't belong to any organic species Maya knew. Her worst fears were confirmed. The war forms were active and heading their way. "There has to be another way out," Maya said, scanning the chamber with fresh eyes. During her previous visits, she had been focused on the dragon. Now she examined the walls, looking for any sign of alternate exits. "There is," Zarathel confirmed, "but it requires trust." Before Maya could ask what she meant, the dragon's massive form began to glow, not the harsh artificial light of the melted chains, but something warm and organic, like sunlight filtered through amber. The glow spread from Zarathel's scales to encompass Maya, and suddenly the human felt different, stronger, faster, more aware of her surroundings than she had ever been before. Her mundane maintenance uniform seemed to shimmer with protective energy, and when she looked at her hands, they were outlined with the same golden light that surrounded the dragon. "What did you do to me?" Maya asked, flexing her fingers and marveling at the way the light danced around them. "Shared power," Zarathel explained. "Your act of kindness created a bond between us. I can temporarily grant you a fraction of my abilities, but the connection works both ways. You will feel what I feel, know what I know." The first war form appeared in the doorway, and Maya's enhanced senses immediately cataloged its threat level. 3 meters tall, armored in some kind of adaptive metal that shifted colors to match its surroundings, armed with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. But more disturbing was what she felt through her connection to Zarathel, the dragon's recognition of the warform's design, and the bitter memory associated with it. These machines had been built specifically to capture her. "The Corvani created them after my first escape," Zarathel explained through their mental link. "They studied my abilities, my weaknesses, my fighting style. Each war form is designed to counter everything I am capable of." More war forms filed into the chamber, their optical sensors sweeping the area with calculated precision. Maya counted 12 of them, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a pack hunter. Their weapons tracked toward Zarathel, and Maya could see energy building in the barrel assemblies. "But they were built to fight the dragon you were 200 years ago," Maya said, sudden understanding flooding through her enhanced consciousness. "They don't know about our bond." Zarathel's mental voice carried a note of surprise and approval. "Clever little human. You begin to understand." The first volley of energy bolts lit up the chamber like a deadly light show. Zarathel moved with fluid grace, her massive form somehow flowing around the attacks like water around stones. But Maya could feel the strain through their bond. The dragon was indeed weakened by her long imprisonment. That's when Maya made her third life-changing decision. Instead of hiding behind Zarathel or looking for escape routes, she ran directly at the nearest war form. Her enhanced speed carried her across the chamber in heartbeats. The war form's sensors tracked her movement, but its combat programming was optimized for fighting a 20-meter dragon, not a small, fast human. By the time it adjusted its aim, Maya was inside its defensive perimeter. She didn't have weapons, but the golden energy surrounding her turned out to be protection enough. When the war form's close-range stunners fired, the energy harmlessly dispersed against her borrowed power. Maya leaped onto the machine's torso, her enhanced strength allowing her to tear through armor plating that should have been impervious to human hands. The war form toppled backward, its systems sparking as Maya's energy-enhanced touch disrupted its internal circuitry. The other machines immediately recalculated their threat assessment, splitting their attention between the dragon and the unexpectedly dangerous human. That moment of divided focus was all Zarathel needed. The dragon's roar shook dust from the ancient walls as she unleashed powers that had been suppressed for 2 centuries. Not fire. That would have been expected, programmed into the warform's countermeasures. Instead, Zarathel wielded gravity itself, creating pockets of intense attraction that pulled the machines off balance and slammed them into walls with crushing force. Maya felt the power flowing through their bond, and suddenly she understood. The energy she had been given wasn't just protection, it was a two-way conduit. Zarathel was using Maya's smaller form and human unpredictability to bypass the warform's programming, while Maya served as an anchor point for abilities that the machines had never been designed to counter. Together, they moved through the mechanical army like a living storm. Maya darted between the towering war forms, her touch disrupting systems and creating openings that Zarathel exploited with surgical precision. The dragon's gravity manipulation became a deadly dance, pulling enemies into position for Maya's disruptive abilities while keeping the humans safe from return fire. Within minutes, the chamber was filled with the smoking remains of what had once been the station's ultimate security measure. Maya stood among the wreckage, breathing hard but unharmed, still glowing with borrowed power. That was incredible, she gasped, looking up at Zarathel with new respect. But they'll send more, won't they? Eventually, Zarathel agreed, but not immediately. The war forms were the station's primary defense against me. Their destruction will force the council representatives to reconsider their approach. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication system crackled to life. The voice that emerged was cold and mechanical, translated through multiple linguistic matrices to accommodate the mixed crew of Zerion 7. Prisoner designation Zarathel Prime. You have violated the terms of your sentence. Return to containment immediately, or face immediate termination. Zarathel's response was a low rumble that Maya felt through the soles of her feet. I have committed no new crimes, council voice. The terms of my imprisonment stated I would be held until death. I chose not to die. Your continued existence is itself a violation. You were sentenced to slow termination as example and warning. By escaping, you have invalidated the council's judgment. Maya stepped forward, surprising herself with her own boldness. The council's judgment was based on the assumption that your prisoner was alone and friendless. Circumstances have changed. There was a long pause before the voice responded. Identity scan indicates you are Maya Chen, Human Designation Maintenance Class Tertiary. You have no authority to interfere in council affairs. I have the authority of someone who has bonded with your prisoner, Maya replied, feeling Zarathel's surprise and approval through their connection. By the laws of the Galactic Accords, a bonding between sentient species creates mutual protection obligations. Any action taken against Zarathel must now consider the welfare of her bonded partner. Maya wasn't sure where the knowledge was coming from, whether it was part of her enhanced awareness or something Zarathel was feeding her through their link. But she could feel the truth of her words, and more importantly, she could sense the Council Voice's uncertainty. Bonding between species requires formal recognition and documentation. No such bonding has been recorded. Because no one bothered to ask if it was possible, Maya shot back. The Corvani built your prison to contain a solitary creature. They never considered that their prisoner might form meaningful connections. Zarathel moved closer to Maya, her massive presence somehow protective rather than threatening. The small human speaks truth, Council Voice. Our bond was formed through freely given kindness and freely accepted obligation. By the old laws that predate even the Corvani Empire, such bonds cannot be dissolved by external authority. The silence stretched long enough that Maya began to wonder if the communication had been cut. When the voice returned, it carried a note of frustration that managed to penetrate even the mechanical translation. This matter requires review by the full council. Both parties will remain confined to current location pending investigation. Unacceptable, Zarathel replied immediately. I have been confined for 2 centuries. I will not return to chains, regardless of council decree. Then you force us to consider more direct options. The threat was clear, and Maya felt Zarathel's battle readiness spike through their bond. But before either of them could respond, a new voice cut through the chamber's communication system. That won't be necessary, Council Voice. I believe we can find a more diplomatic solution. Maya recognized the accent immediately, Centauran, with the precise diction that marked someone from the core worlds. But there was something else in the voice, a confidence that suggested significant political weight. Ambassador Reith, the Council Voice acknowledged with obvious reluctance. This matter falls outside normal diplomatic channels. Does it? Ambassador Reith replied smoothly. A human citizen has made contact with a previously thought unreachable prisoner, potentially opening new avenues for justice and rehabilitation. The Human Colonial Authority is very interested in the implications. Maya's jaw dropped. The Human Colonial Authority was the closest thing humanity had to real political power in galactic affairs, but they rarely involved themselves in individual cases. The idea that they might intervene on behalf of a maintenance worker seemed impossible. Furthermore, the ambassador continued, preliminary reports suggest that Ms. Chen has demonstrated remarkable capability in first contact protocols. The authority is prepared to formally recognize her actions and extend full diplomatic protection. Through their bond, Maya felt Zarathel's amusement. It seems your species is more politically astute than the Council believed, little human. Maya was still processing the implications when the ambassador's next words changed everything again. However, given the sensitive nature of this situation, we propose that both Ms. Chen and her bonded partner be transferred to neutral territory for proper evaluation. The research station at New Geneva would provide appropriate facilities for determining the nature and implications of this unprecedented bond. A research station? Maya repeated slowly. Not a prison? Indeed. The authority has significant interest in interspecies bonding phenomena. Both parties would be treated as honored guests while scholars study this remarkable development. Maya looked up at Zarathel, feeling the dragon's complex emotions through their link. Hope warred with suspicion. Gratitude battled with the fear born from 2 centuries of imprisonment. It could be another trap, Zarathel warned through their private connection. I have learned not to trust the promises of those in power. But Maya sensed something else in the dragon's thoughts, a desperate desire for freedom that she was afraid to acknowledge. 200 years of torture had not broken Zarathel's spirit, but they had taught her caution. "Sometimes you have to take a chance," Maya said aloud, making sure both Zarathel and the listening authorities could hear her. "Sometimes someone offers you soup, and everything changes." Zarathel's golden eyes met Maya's brown ones, and in that moment, they both understood that their greatest adventure was just beginning. The Dragon's Chain, third document. 6 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Research Station, watching Zarathel soar through the artificial sky of the Habitat Dome. The dragon had grown stronger with each passing day, her scales now gleaming with health rather than the dull patina of captivity. But more than physical recovery, Zarathel had regained something Maya was only beginning to understand: her sense of purpose. The research station had been everything Ambassador Reith promised and more. Instead of the sterile laboratory Maya had feared, New Geneva was a marvel of adaptive architecture that accommodated dozens of different species and their various environmental needs. Zarathel had been given a vast chamber that opened onto the main habitat dome, while Maya enjoyed quarters that were luxurious beyond anything she had ever imagined. Dr. Sarah Nakamura approached from behind, her tablet displaying the latest test results. The xenobiologist had become Maya's closest friend during their time at the station, partly because she was one of the few researchers who treated both Maya and Zarathel as partners in the research rather than subjects to be studied. "The council delegation arrives tomorrow," Dr. Nakamura said without preamble. "Are you ready for this?" Maya touched the pendant around her neck, a gift from Zarathel that helped focus their bond across distances. Through it, she could feel the dragon's contentment as she rode the artificial thermals, but also her underlying tension about the approaching confrontation. "As ready as we can be," Maya replied. "The evidence is pretty clear." That was an understatement. 6 months of intensive study had revealed that the bond between Maya and Zarathel was unlike anything previously recorded in galactic history. It wasn't just emotional or psychological, it was a fundamental alteration of their respective neural patterns that had created a truly symbiotic relationship. When they worked together, both beings operated at levels far beyond their individual capabilities. Maya's problem-solving skills and adaptability were enhanced by Zarathel's vast experience and knowledge, while the dragon's raw power was guided by Maya's intuitive understanding of complex systems. They had solved engineering problems that had puzzled the station's best minds and developed new approaches to interspecies communication that promised to revolutionize galactic diplomacy. But the most significant discovery was what their bond revealed about Zarathel's original crime. "Have you told her about the latest findings?" Dr. Nakamura asked, settling beside Maya at the observation window. Maya nodded toward the soaring form above them. "She's known all along. I think she was waiting for us to figure it out on our own." The truth had emerged gradually, pieced together from fragments of Corvani records and Zarathel's recovered memories. 200 years ago, the dragon had not been a criminal at all. She had been a researcher, one of the few non-Corvani beings granted access to the Empire's most sensitive projects. Her crime had been refusing to weaponize a discovery that could have given the Corvani dominion over every other species in the galaxy. The Corvani had been developing technology to suppress the bonding capability that allowed different species to form the kind of partnership Maya and Zarathel now shared. If perfected, it would have made the Empire's subjects literally incapable of cooperating against their oppressors. Zarathel had destroyed the research and been imprisoned as a traitor. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Nakamura murmured. "If the Corvani had succeeded in deploying that technology, the entire galactic community would be different. Species that should be allies would be isolated from each other, incapable of the cooperation that makes the Galactic Council possible." "Which explains why the Council has been so resistant to our findings," Maya said. Admitting that Zarathel was a hero rather than a criminal means acknowledging that the current power structure is based on a fundamental lie. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on Maya's personal communicator. The ID showed it was from Ambassador Reith, who had become their unofficial advocate in the complex political maneuvering surrounding their case. "Ms. Chen," the ambassador's voice was carefully neutral. "I wanted to inform you that the council delegation includes some unexpected members. It appears that several species have taken significant interest in your situation." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of interest? The kind that suggests tomorrow's hearing will determine more than just your personal fate. There are forces within the council who see your bond with Zarathel as either a great opportunity or a significant threat. I would recommend extreme caution in your testimony. As if sensing Maya's distress, Zarathel altered her flight pattern and descended toward the observation deck. The dragon landed with surprising grace for such a massive creature, her golden eyes immediately seeking Maya's through the transparent aluminum barrier. "Troubled thoughts, little human," Zarathel's mental voice carried comfort and concern. "Share them with me." Maya pressed her palm against the barrier, and Zarathel matched the gesture with one massive claw. Even through the physical separation, their bond hummed with shared understanding. "Tomorrow decides everything," Maya said. "If the council rules against us, then we will face whatever comes together," Zarathel replied. "You freed me from chains of metal, Maya Chen. I will not allow them to place chains of law around either of us." Dr. Nakamura watched the exchange with the fascination of a scientist observing a phenomenon that still defied complete understanding. "You know," she said quietly, "regardless of what the council decides, you two have already changed everything. The mere fact that your bond exists proves that the barriers between species are far more artificial than we ever imagined." The next morning arrived with a flurry of activity as delegations from across the galaxy converged on New Geneva. Maya had expected representatives from the major species, but the scope of attendance surprised even Ambassador Reith. It seemed that news of the human-dragon bond had spread throughout the galactic community, inspiring hope among some and fear among others. The hearing chamber had been specially configured to accommodate Zarathel's massive form while still providing appropriate seating for the various delegates. Maya stood beside her bonded partner, feeling both dwarfed by the dragon's presence and empowered by their connection. Council Speaker Vorth, a crystalline being whose thoughts were as transparent as his physical form, called the session to order. "We are gathered to determine the legal status of the entity known as Zarathel Prime and her claimed bond with the human Maya Chen. The implications of this case extend far beyond the individuals involved." Maya had expected formal proceedings, but what followed was more like a philosophical debate about the nature of consciousness, cooperation, and justice. Speaker after speaker rose to present evidence, theories, and arguments that ranged from the scientific to the metaphysical. The ethereal delegate argued that bonds like Maya and Zarathel's were evidence of a fundamental unity underlying all consciousness, while the Zephyrian representative insisted that such connections violated the natural order that kept species separate and stable. But it was the human delegation that provided the most surprising testimony. The human colonial authority wishes to formally recognize the bond between citizen Maya Chen and the entity Zarathel as a new form of interspecies partnership, announced Ambassador Reith. "Furthermore, we propose that both individuals be granted special status as ambassadors of cooperation, tasked with developing protocols for similar bondings between willing members of different species." The reaction was immediate and polarized. Some delegates erupted in approval, seeing the potential for unprecedented cooperation between their peoples. Others responded with alarm, viewing the proposal as a threat to established hierarchies and traditional separations. Council Speaker Vorth called for order, but Maya could see that the chamber was dividing into factions. Through her bond with Zarathel, she sensed the dragon's growing concern about the political implications of their situation. That's when the unexpected intervention occurred. "If I may address the council," a new voice cut through the debate with quiet authority. All eyes turned to the previously silent section reserved for observer species, those civilizations too young or too small to hold formal council membership. The speaker was a tall, elegant being Maya didn't recognize, but whose presence seemed to command respect even from the senior delegates. "I am First Scholar Keth of the Archival Collective," the being continued. "My people have served as galactic historians for over 3,000 years. We have remained neutral in political matters, but this case requires us to share certain historical perspectives." Council Speaker Vorth hesitated, clearly uncertain about allowing testimony from a non-member species, but the Archival Collective's reputation for neutrality and vast knowledge made it difficult to refuse. "The Council recognizes First Scholar Keth," Vorth announced reluctantly. "Thank you, Speaker. What we witness here today is not unprecedented, though it has been forgotten by design. The Corvani Empire systematically suppressed knowledge of interspecies bonding because such relationships represented the greatest threat to their dominion. But before their rise, bonding between species was not only common, it was the foundation of galactic civilization." First Scholar Keth activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images of ancient cities, ships, and artworks that clearly showed different species working in harmony far closer than anything Maya had ever seen. "The Great Library contains records of thousands of successful interspecies bonds, partnerships that led to advances in science, art, and philosophy that we have never been able to recreate. The decline of these relationships coincides directly with the Corvani expansion and their systematic campaign to convince species that such bonds were dangerous or impossible." Maya felt Zarathel's emotions spike through their connection. Vindication, sadness, and a fierce joy that her 200-year sacrifice had not been in vain. The individual known as Zarathel Prime was imprisoned not for committing a crime, but for refusing to participate in the systematic destruction of galactic civilization's greatest achievement. The bond she now shares with Maya Chen represents not an aberration to be studied, but a return to our species' natural state of cooperation. The chamber fell silent as the implications of First Scholar Keth's testimony sank in. If the Archival Collective's records were accurate, and their reputation for truth was unquestioned, then the entire foundation of current galactic politics was built on manufactured divisions. Furthermore, First Scholar Keth continued, our records indicate that species capable of forming such bonds inevitably develop beyond the need for external governance. The fear that drives current opposition to the Chen-Zarathel bond is not fear of instability, it is fear of evolution. Council Speaker Vorth's crystalline form flickered with agitation. Are you suggesting that the Council itself is an impediment to galactic progress? I am suggesting that the Council has the opportunity to guide that progress rather than resist it, First Scholar Keth replied smoothly. The choice is yours. Maya felt the chamber's energy shift as delegates began to reconsider their positions. The Archival Collective's revelation had reframed the entire debate, transforming Maya and Zarathel from anomalies requiring control into pioneers of a forgotten path forward. When the vote finally came, it was closer than Maya had expected, but decisive enough to be meaningful. By a margin of 3 votes, the Council formally recognized the bond between Maya Chen and Zarathel, granted them full diplomatic immunity, and established a new branch of galactic law governing interspecies partnerships. More importantly, they authorized the creation of a new research initiative to explore the potential for other species to form similar bonds, with Maya and Zarathel as the program's co-directors. 6 months later, Maya stood once again on an observation deck, but this time she was watching the first graduating class of the Interspecies Bonding Academy. 12 pairs of different species had successfully formed partnerships that enhanced both individuals while creating something entirely new. Zarathel landed beside the deck with her usual grace, but now she wasn't alone. 3 young dragons from her homeworld had joined the program, each partnered with beings from different species. The sight of a dragon bonded with a crystalline Vorthak, another with an ethereal, and a third with the enthusiastic young Zephyrian never failed to make Maya smile. "Proud thoughts," Zarathel commented, settling her massive form into the comfortable depression that had been built specifically for her. "As you should be." "You have accomplished something I thought impossible." "We accomplished it," Maya corrected, leaning against Zarathel's warm scales. "And we're just getting started." Through their bond, Maya could sense Zarathel's vast contentment and anticipation for the future. The dragon, who had spent 2 centuries in chains, now soared freely among the stars, teaching others that the barriers between species were illusions that could be overcome with kindness, courage, and an understanding that consciousness recognized no artificial boundaries. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but Maya had learned that the greatest discovery wasn't in some distant star system. It was in the simple truth that bringing soup to someone who was suffering could change everything. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness had consequences that rippled across galaxies, breaking chains that had bound civilizations for millennia, and opening doors to futures that no one species could imagine alone. As they watched the bonded pairs practicing their coordinated exercises below, Maya smiled and reached into her pocket for the thermos she had brought. The soup was different this time, a recipe developed by the Academy's multicultural kitchen staff to nourish beings from a dozen different worlds. But the principle remained the same. Sometimes all it took to change the universe was remembering to share what you had with someone who needed it.